Good evening, my name is Rightblend, and tonight I'm going to break down for you day 13 of the trial of Pat King. Now, the defense told us that today would be the shortest day, that it would be a partial day, and unfortunately it ended up being the longest day so far. It ran 30 minutes over to like 5:02 p.m., and trust me, and that's no fault to the defense. Like I'm not gonna say anything about that. But what I will say is that it's incredibly difficult to be in court emotionally, to process this, to pay attention to everything, to transcribe what is happening as accurately as possible on a phone, and be as clumsy as I am, and then accurately try to get that to you guys, and then to summarize it every day is very hard. Today was very hard. We had 5 witnesses, 2 police officers and 3 civilian witnesses. The defense did rest their case, so on Friday we will have the closing arguments, which will be, I guess, it will be the 14th day of Pat King's trial, where both the Crown and defense will have half a day to make their case and tell the judge basically where they're going with everything. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but let's first dive into the first witness of the day. Was Officer, so she's detective, but she's a constable, Isabel Seer. Now, we've heard that name a lot, both in the Tamara Leach trial and this trial. I believe she was the one who composed, one of the main people who composed the PLT logs, which is the composition of the PLT chats from, I believe, Signal was the service they were using, and it was just basically anytime something happened, Officer PLT would enter something, and then it would go into the chat, and at the end, it was just thrown into a massive compilation for disclosure purposes called the PLT log. So she discussed basically the structure of the PLT, the role of the PLT. Let me just make this down. And her assignment, then she explained that every PLT officer is assigned to different people. They were assigned to leaders. So that's basically to say that they're assigned to people of influence who will be able to give them information conduit, I believe was part of her testimony. I may have it conflated with someone else because, guys, we had 5 witnesses today. It's all blending together now. There's just so much of the same thing over and over again. Eventually I'm going to make a mistake here and attribute something to someone who didn't say it. But I do believe she did speak about that, about who PLT was assigned to. And she said she was assigned to, I believe, Chris Guerra. I hope I'm saying that right. I certainly didn't spell it right on the Twitter thread. And Daniel Bulford. But it's interesting. So she said that, like, once the PLT was assigned to someone, they would stay with that person, and that was it, because they didn't want to have the PLT moving around. However, she also testified that she reached out to Pat King and had a conversation on the phone with Pat King on February 9th, tried to set up a meeting for February 10th. It never happened. And then also tried to reach out on February 14th, but he never responded. And this also goes to the leadership argument, because she said she was reaching out originally on the 9th and the 10th to set up a meeting about trying to get trucks moved. And it was the intention of the police not to move the trucks out of market or the residential areas, but out of town. But I guess they took what they could get, and they were trying to facilitate it. It never happened. She believes that he answered his phone the first time on the 9th because she was calling from a private number, but she never spoke to him again. They agreed to meet, to set up a location on the 10th and a time to meet, but that never happened. She suggested on the 10th to no reply that they meet at City Hall at noon. Never happened. And then on the 14th, she reached out in response to the, I guess, the good faith agreement between Litch and the mayor. I believe that was the February 13th agreement, trying to get his, I guess, whatever was going on with him with that. And she said that they reached out to leaders to get them to communicate. And they were reaching out to leaders, as she did on the 9th, I assume, in her testimony, to facilitate movement of truck through leaders. And of course, much argument persists about the definition of leader, organizer, instruction person, whoever, coordinator, whatever you want to call it. So that's very important. And she was assigned before the Freedom Convoy to special events. Sorry, I do have some notes here because we have 5 witnesses. So she was assigned to the special events team. And as a member of the special events team, which, as you remember, the PLT used to report to, now I believe they're a standalone thing, as we heard from Sergeant Feng Li's testimony nonetheless. So she was in special events, so that's why she kind of is where she was. And she testified that they had meetings. They had meetings discussing where the trucks would go and where they would park. And sometime before the convoy, they were receiving intel, I guess, from policing partners, intelligence agencies, whoever, that was telling them this was going to be huge. So they had the meetings to discuss, where are they going to park, blah, blah, blah. They hand out the maps. I don't think her knowledge of the Exhibit 26, was it? The ingress map is as good as some other officers. Like, Officer Askin was very clear about the map, that it was there. But nonetheless, she did testify to having meetings with people and city partners and coming to the conclusions of where people would park. But this raised an interesting point for me in this dialogue when she was, I believe it was on chief examination with the defense. She said that they had the meetings that the convoy was going to park. They thought it was going to be a 2-day event, but then they got intel that it was a huge number of people were coming. But yet the police, so somebody at the police, at least her in her role at the special events department and their policing partner, knew that there was partners and city whoever else knew there was a large amount of people coming. Yet they still let the trucks come in to park and to do what they were doing. But she did say that if she was making the decisions, things would have gone differently. So she probably would have been like Kim Ayot and blocked the whole road so no one could come in, because at the time police were telling them, legal opinion were telling them that they couldn't just block people in, without no reason because of mobility rights. But now it seems the legal advice and the law itself has changed, because now they are doing that. We saw that during Rolling Thunder and other times. Let me just go down here. The judge had some lack of understanding. He said he didn't understand the exchange about the 14th, and basically, he made the comment several times throughout all of this. He doesn't know what the evidence has to do with any of the charges before the court, and he said he wasn't understanding anything of what Officer Seer was saying. Oh, she also indicated that Nicole Bach's name is spelled is pronounced Bach. I said like Bach, like the Bach. The composer, I believe, is how it sounded when she said it in court. Again, sorry if I'm saying these wrong. Again, sorry if I'm toasted out of my mind. I'm just tired. It's long. This is draining and taxing. If you've never done this, sat in there, tried to pay attention to all of this, and then produce these summaries, think about these summaries, it's just a lot, folks. So excuse my tardiness and lack of composure and lack of streamliningness here. But let's get through this together. Let's talk about it. Let's get to the important parts. Let's see. I'm just trying to see. So another interesting point was the definition of the mischief, right? Because the judge said that it was consensual between the police and the protesters on the front end. Like at the beginning, they agreed to park here and there, and then it started to pick up later on that maybe something began to manifest that was mischief. And then the Crown piped up right away and was like, actually, no, it was mischief from basically the first day, because Pat King was on January 30th trying to sneak trucks onto Kent where they were told they could not park on Kent, so that was mischief. Therefore, the whole convoy was mischief. But it seems the judge thinking at the time when he was letting us see a little peek of it, was that he saw that there was some consensus between the city police and protesters at the beginning, and that maybe changed along the road, where some people started to do what may be considered mischief. And what role Pat King had in that is the ultimate question of this entire thing, right? They brought up, so the Crown tried to correct that, though. The Crown got some counterpoints, and on that, I don't know if it was 100% landed. They did mention the thing about the sneaking and whatnot. I believe that was on this witness. Against 5 witnesses today. So that's a lot to try and compartmentalize and summarize properly. The Freedom Convoy, the Crown seems to love showing that Freedom Convoy Unity website, whatever it was. I don't know if it was Freedom Unity or whatever it was, but it's the one that has Pat King's name and James Bowder's name and their phone numbers. And like everybody they show it to, nobody's ever seen it. And then they'll read the phone number, but I think Pat's already changed his number into the public record. And is that Pat King's number? Some people will say, yeah, okay, that's the number. Like I think Officer Seer said that's the number I called him on at the time. But other people were like, I don't even know that. Like, what's that? What is this? Then there was some more questions. So another thing is, we're going to know on Friday exactly when the sides spell it out, when the defense and the Crown spell it out. But whatever legal argument the defense is making here, it seems the Crown may be trying to craft their cross and their replies to try and attack that. So there's a theory maybe that the defense is going for officially induced error. I don't know. I've seen that report. I don't know if that's true. We will see. I believe on Friday they're going to spell out exactly where they think each side's going to say where they think all the evidence leaves us, and what kind of defense or conviction that should be the result of the summation of everything. So in the case of that, we can see the Crown is asking witnesses, especially the police officers, if they ever gave anyone any legal advice, and they didn't. Like they asked Officer Seer, did you ever give anyone any legal advice? No. So that's, I guess, to go towards that potential defense. Maybe, again, we'll hear it spelled out from the horse's mouth on Friday, so I'll be sure to summarize that. But I believe the Crown is trying to craft all of their responses around these things. Like, did you give any legal advice? Did you tell people they could stay? And then even for, we'll get to that with Lamarch. But so, and then again, see, I heard it answered, but I don't think it was ever asked who assigned the PLT officers to who, like to which leader, target, or person they wanted to contact with to facilitate that conduit flow of information. And was it Seer? It could have been Seer. I do miss a couple things here and there. Again, it's moving fast. I'm texting, I'm all these other things, and so it could have been her. She talked about her chain of command, some her staff sergeant, and I think she mentioned an inspector. I missed that. I know there's a name that, anyways. So then the next witness was OPS PLT officer Christian Lamarch. He was. It's not clear who he was assigned to. But for the defense, the chief examination of him was really short. They basically just asked him about a PLT log entry he made on January 30th, where he talked about where he talked about barricades. They asked him what kind of barricades they were and who put them there. So January 30th, he said he does different types of barricades, and it was the city who put them there. And then the defense asked, well, was it the police who requested them there? And he said he wasn't sure if it was the police or the city. But that's all the police and authority testimony we've heard so far is that police had jurisdiction of the protest. They made the decision on which roads to close, and then the partner agencies, OC Transpo, Natalie Hano, no offense to nothing against her or anything, and roads and traffic and everything, then worked off of the police's decisions to make it happen. So which roads were closed, et cetera, were all something. Now partner agencies like Kim Ayotte testified, the fire paramedic, had some input onto some of those decisions, saying, hey, we need this road and lane open. But ultimately what happened was up to the police. So for him not to know that. So then we get to so that was it. It was a short chief. Then we get to the cross-examination. The Crown basically walks him through. He's had several encounters with Pat King, I believe most of them surrounding Confederation Park. I believe there was an incident on February 2nd where J.D. Anderson or something Chief Anderson there was an attempted erection, like they were trying to put up teepees, and they were having some sort of a ceremony of fire, but then they were notified by Lamarche in a letter from the host nation, the Kichi, I'm sorry, I can't say that, that they were not welcome to do that. And then at that time he said that Pat King got upset, but eventually Pat King did calm down. There was some other interactions I believe he testified to. I'm not sure exactly. I think he said he had 2, maybe 3 interactions with King, and that's what he was talking about with that. He said he calmed down, and then he was asking, what was the purpose of King being in Confederation Park? And he said, Lamarche testified, I believe he said, to calm people down, and that he did eventually once he this letter, because they thought they had permission. Lamarche testified from whoever, but they didn't have permission to do that, and they were asking them to leave. Then there was Anderson was there trying to do his thing, and then King even said to Lamarche that he would drive to the host nation to try and work this out. That was the big takeaway. So again, I'm not going to have everything. Follow the thread on my X account at RightBlend if you want more of the nitty gritty. But let's move on to the third witness of the day, which was, now we took the lunch break. We come back with Christine McPherson. She's I believe she was born in Ottawa. She definitely lived a long time in Ottawa. I think she also testified she lived 10 years in the Middle East. I think she testified she was in her 50s. I believe. I'm apologizing if I get that wrong. She was also involved with the NCI, the National Citizens Inquiry. Now on Chief, she basically explained that she works for the National Psychology Association, which is I believe that's the correct name, which is an organization in downtown Ottawa, and it's responsible for accreditation of psychological institutions and psychological internships, and I believe something else. I don't know what else, if it's the scope of practice for psychologists or what have you, but she's involved in an administrative role on that, in the accreditation side. And she testified that during Freedom Convoy 2022, her office is very good, but she was working hybrid even at that time, because there's certain things she needs to have in the office to do her job, and she's more productive there. So she was working 3.5 to 4 days a week. Usually she would take the Monday or the Friday at home. So even when the convoy came in, she was working downtown on Laurier, and the judge pointed out that the address, I believe 141 Laurier, is very close. A stone throw away from the courtroom is what he said, but he said, nobody's throwing stones, right? I think that was somebody else who made that joke, but so that's where we are. And she testified that she never protested before. She did not participate in the Freedom Convoy protest. She is a resident of Ottawa, maybe not exactly Centertown, but she lives, the Crown even said on Cross, they came out, she's about 3 kilometers where she lives from Parliament Hill. So not not next door, but actually not too close. Like if this was a cacophony of total chaos and noise, you would hear it 3 kilometers away. Like Canada Day, you hear the flyovers, you hear the other things happening from 3 kilometers away. But she did say that she could hear some things in her backyard. She testified she had a skating rink back there or something, and she's not too far from the. I think she said she was at the major intersection near Montreal and Vanier Parkway, so she is close to the Coventry location, but she she could hear the horns from there from time to time. She said before the February 7th injunction, she could hear horns in the evening, but after the February 7th injunction, she rarely heard horns in the evening. So she was on Chief. She also testified about how she would get to and from work. She didn't participate in the protest at all. But she got to work. Some days in the winter, she said she would bus. During the convoy, her bus was detoured. So instead of just being able to take her normal route, she'd have to detour a couple blocks. She said on the winter days that it's really bad. Normally, she would take a Lyft and an Uber. She said a few times she was able to get her Lyft or an Uber to her actual work address off Laurier, but one time she had to go a block differently, and then sometimes she had to walk. She says normally at night she doesn't like to walk to the Rideau Center, but after the first few days of the convoy and kind of seeing where things were, she felt very safe and actually did walk to the Rideau Center to catch her bus, or she took her Lyft or whatever. The only day there was one time she was trying to take a Lyft or an Uber. I think it was in the first few days. It took over 40 minutes, so that's when she decided to walk, I guess, towards the Rideau Center, and she found that it was quite safe, and she saw no violence, no aggression or anything like that. Again, she didn't participate in the protest. So that's her take. She worked downtown 4 days a week during convoy. She couldn't hear it from inside the office. When she was out on Laurier, she said she could hear the horns, but they were kind of further away and quieter, and she could hear them sometimes at her house. But then a big difference after the February 7th injunction. And she said that she did go into work the day of the enforcement action. I believe it was the 17th or the 18th of February. Police asked her if she really wanted to go in. She did go in. And then she said she had quite a difficult time getting home. She had to walk quite a ways around to get to the eastern end of Rideau Street, where she eventually called an Uber or a Lyft to take her home. So that's her experience there. Now on Cross, the Crown focused on her involvement in the NCI, and she testified. Christine McPherson testified that at the NCI, it was founded in the mid-2022. She got involved in 2023. The Crown tried to suggest that she had strong feelings before the convoy came in, that she was, whatever. But she said, because of the disagreement with the mandates and other things. And, she was asked about what recommendations the NCI made. I can't really talk about that here, but you can go follow my Twitter thread for more of that. She was, they did focus in on the NCI. They said, they asked her if she would describe the city streets as occupied. She said occupation. She said when she thinks of an occupation, she thinks of occupied France or a war. This wasn't a war. This was, people exercising their rights. She said it's not the first time her bus has been delayed. There's protests all the time in Ottawa. It's something that she accepts as someone who works and lives near the downtown, lives near the downtown, that there will be protests. She supports everyone's rights to protest. She listed a bunch of causes. She said that's what was happening. It wasn't an occupation. Occupation is war. People were exercising their rights. And then she talked more about the NCI. She talked about how, again, it's normal. It's normal. It wasn't something. And at one point, the Crown tried to say that she was put out of her way, right? Like she was done bad by it when she had to do, like the lift had to go through the Queensway instead of taking Rideau Street or whatever. She said it's normal. This is part of life living in the capital city. So that was her testimony. There was other things. Again, go back to to my coverage on X if you want the full thing. Now we move to the fourth witness of the day, who is another civilian by the name of Calir Gral. I hope I'm saying that right, Mr. Gral. He's a Sikh gentleman from Brampton. He's just about to turn 42. I think he said he's been a realtor for 16 years. And he basically had participated in some protests around the Brampton area, but then when he heard about the convoy, decided he wanted to go in and see it. So he went in. Oh, and Miss McPherson, I think she was also asked about King's social media. I don't think she said she followed him. If she knew of him, I don't think she did until after the fact. So again, if you want those exact details, go through the thread and find that. I don't know how long we're running now. I'm going to try to finish this. So with Mr. Gral, he is a realtor from Brampton. He was participating in protests. Then he heard about the convoy. He wanted to go check it out. He was there basically. He was there 4 weekends. He said it was the most loving, peaceful event of patriotic Canadians he ever seen. So he wanted to be there. He even remarked at one point that when the CBC, this is in Cross. We'll get there, but. He, on the second weekend, he basically found other Sikhs, and they started doing what they call langar. I hope I'm saying that right, where they're doing an open kitchen, feeding people. He said he would go within a radius of the tent just in case they needed him to get something from a vehicle somewhere. But other than that, they were handing out free food to anybody who needed it. It was the most loving experience, and he says it's one of the best experiences of his life, and he's happy he was there. He was even there on the. He spoke also about, so that was the first, second, and third weekend. On the fourth weekend, it was the enforcement. He said he needed to be there with those people. He needed to be there and stand in solidarity. He said one of his friends were arrested. He was assaulted with a stick. Well, you remember the RCP had those big sticks, those big wooden sticks. His friend had his turban knocked off. The religious flag was thrown on the ground. There was footage of that. But nonetheless. And then at one point he said, this isn't something... No, that was I'm missing somebody here. I am missing somebody here. Yeah, I think I jumped the gun here. I think I skipped a witness. Sorry, folks. I think we might have had 6 witnesses today. I recall another witness. I forget the gentleman's name. So we'll keep talking about Mr. Gral. Guys, I can't. I mean, this is a lot. This is a lot to deal with in one day. I don't even know what time we're running at here. Let me check. I don't want to stitch it either. I don't want to stitch the video together, make another video. This is just totally throwing me off. I'm going to have to exclude his name, but I remember the gist of his testimony, so I'll mention that. So anyways, back to Mr. Gral. He said he was on the fourth weekend. That's when the police did their thing. His friend was arrested. He wasn't. He was, standing in solidarity. He was hit with a stick because because I guess he was asking them to pick up the religious flag from the ground because it's disrespectful. And there was video of that. The Crown asked him again about the website, I think, but the Crown also pulled up these 2 pictures. One picture of a group of Sikhs at Parliament Hill, I guess, during the convoy or a protest. He said, are you in this picture? He wasn't. Do you know these people? They're friends of his, I guess. And then there was a second picture of a street, and on the picture of the street, there's 2 cars with Canadian flags. There's a Sikh gentleman seeming to stand on the side of the road. There's other traffic on the far side of the frame of the picture. And there's a guy, another Sikh gentleman, sticking out the roof of one of the cars. But the Crown's basically like, would you agree that this picture shows that the road's blocked? And he says, well, no, I wouldn't agree because it's a still image. They could be moving, And just that was the exchange. That was the extent of the exchange. And long story short, Mr. Gral put up the $25,000 bond for Mr. King. The Crown said, oh, you did that because he's a leader. He said he would do that for anybody. And he said... and he said, okay, well, why didn't you do that for anyone else? He said he didn't have access to them. Then the Crown said, oh, so you were looking for access to Mr. King. And then then Mr. Gral responded, no, I was in a Telegram group, someone had it, and I ended up putting up this bond this bail because he kept having his release delayed and delayed and delayed, so I put up the money for him to get out. And the Crown also brought up, I guess, the Crown asked him, are you best friends with Mr. King? And he said no. So he brings up a tweet from Rupa S. I can't say her, Supermanaya. Her last name, I struggle with it, but it's a tweet, and it's from the POEC, I guess, where Miss Rupa is saying that Mr. Gral is Pat King's best friend and some other things, and the Crown introduced it as saying, like, a fellow right-winger of a fellow right-winger, Rupa S, is saying that you are Pat King's best friend. Are you Pat King's best friend? And he said, no, I'm not Pat King's best. So that's the level of what we're at in there. And again, about his encounters, when did he first see King? When did he first see him on social media? All these things. And he testified clearly. He's like, I would, whether Pat King said hold the line or not, lots of people were saying that it wasn't Pat King's word, and he would have shown up regardless. And then there was another exchange about, were you counsel, because Mr. Gral, I guess, made a Instagram post where he said it was unjust that Pat King was being charged with counseling mischief. And he said, and then the Crown's like, are you a lawyer? No. And then the Crown asked him, well, how do you come to that conclusion? He's like, well, because he's like, were you counseled by King or something like that? And he's like, well, no, because I didn't have a horn to honk. He's counseled with honking horn, but who is he counseling? And then the Crown's like, well, that's my point. Well, that's a question that I think I've raised before. Like, who are the people King is alleged to have counseled? All these people basically said the same thing, that they were there of their own merit, that they were there of their own fruition and volition to make these choices, to be there and to stand up for what they believed in. And I thought it was good testimony. He has 3 young children. He's married. He's got a good life. And there was another exchange because even Mr. Gral testified about what kind of vehicle he has. I believe he said he has his Tesla. Sorry, and at another point, the Crown says, "Oh, you wanted to park your truck on the streets and honk your horn?" He's like, "Well, no, I don't have a truck." Even though he had already said he has an electric vehicle, he's like, "I have an electric vehicle, but that doesn't really match with your description of us right wingers." And he was alluding back to the comment about Rupa being a fellow right winger, saying that Mr. Gral is best friends with Pat King at the POEC, I believe. So. That's the day. There was another witness. I forget his name. He was a mid-40-year-old. He lives with his mother. He delivers flooring tile, but he was really well spoken, and he was there at the convoy 2 days. The first day, I think, the first Saturday, and then the last day. And he gave a lot of things. He said a lot of good things. He said he was there because it was the right thing to do. It was the most peaceful, loving thing. That's what we've heard from basically everybody. Again, sorry, guys. I don't know how long I'm running right now. 25 minutes. My goodness. I'm sorry about this. I'm going to have to try and wrap this up. So this other witness, I can't remember his name. I guess witness 6, we'll call him. I think he testified before Mr. Gral, or yes, I think it was he was the first one after the break because he had to go back to work, I think, after the lunch break. I mean, guys, it was such a busy day. I forget his name. I wish I had it somewhere. It's on my X account. I apologize for missing that 6th witness's name. He testified about how it was loving, how he gave a speech on the first day, and he was asked about all of his observations and stuff, and when did he come to know King? Did he follow him on social media? But he made it clear that he was there because he wanted to be there, because it was happening. It was something he believed in. He didn't believe in the government overreach at the time. He even quoted Thomas Jefferson at one point, saying, when resistance becomes law. When tyranny becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And he spoke quite eloquently, and he said a lot of the things that are good. I don't know how much that helped the legal case, but certainly what he was saying was true about the overreach. He said that the convoy was effective, that it had Quebec drop their tax on what, that it had and that Saskatchewan changed their mandates, that the plan for an interprovincial trucking mandate was dropped, but other things remained. And he talked about the speech he gave briefly on I believe the Saturday that he attended on the first weekend, and then he was asked, and he spoke also about his last weekend that he was there, where the enforcement action was happening, that he had seen it happening. Basically, he promised his mother after the first time not to go back there. For political, I guess she was concerned. She was very into everything that was happening, believed the narratives all the way, but on this she didn't really disagree with that. She just didn't want him going, and so he agreed for that until the last day when he saw all the action happening, and he had to be back there with that solidarity and love. And he went back, and he said he was on the front line. He didn't get arrested, and he told police that he wouldn't he didn't want to get arrested, but he wasn't going to leave until they started pushing him. So at one point, I guess he gets pepper sprayed. Some French people help him recover. He washes his eyes with snow, and then he goes back to another line to stand with them. I think that was the Saturday, that was the Saturday. The Saturday after, was that the 18th? Of February. I'm not too sure. But he said he had to. He was told by police when he came in on foot. Because he had done some snow removal with his friend, but his friend dropped him off at the periphery of the thing. He went through a checkpoint. He was told by police that he'd be arrested if he was in there, but he was able to walk in and stand on the line and stand on both lines. And he said he didn't do that because of Pat King. He did it. It was his decision to do that. I don't know what extent of interactions he had with King, what knowledge he had of Pat King, social media. It escapes my mind. But the Crown was really fixated on his descriptions of the last day, saying, the police were very gentle with you. They didn't arrest you. They allowed you to tell them that you wouldn't do this. And then he basically at some point said that this isn't what we do in Canada. And the judge said, "What do you mean this isn't what we do in Canada?" And the witness, sorry, I forget his name again, said, "We don't beat people who are doing nothing wrong." And the judge kind of, I don't know if the point was received well, but the judge didn't have anything further to say. I know in another comment the judge said to Mr. Gral, I think he said, regarding when he was talking about being assaulted by the police, I guess, when he said he was pushed back or hit with a stick and not arrested. He said, if Mr. Gral wants to fight the police, he should find another, what is it? Output for that, another way to do that. And Mr. Grewal's like, well, I wasn't fighting with the police. Like, I wasn't there to do that. I was peaceful, standing in love, solidarity with patriotic grassroots Canadians. So that was an interesting thing as well. Gives you perspective both on what the judge is thinking and how things are going overall. So again, I'm sorry I forget that last witness's name. He was the first one, I believe, before these other two. I don't know where Christine McPherson fits in on this. I know 6 witnesses in a day, guys. That's so many. And then we had, finally, the last one was Dale Zukato. He came in with Alberta. He's from Central Alberta, oil field worker, early 60s. Came with his wife in the pickup truck, last minute decision. There was a lot of focus from the Crown of if he had radio communication with Pat King. He didn't. He had like a walkie-talkie and a CB, but he wasn't able to reach King. The Crown was really focused on if he was able to do that on cross. Again, I'm jumping between chief examination from the defense and cross, but it's so much for one day to compartmentalize and try to summarize. So Mr. Dale Zukato, Zuccatt 0. Sorry, not 0. My goodness, I'm tired. We need to get this done. It's 30 minutes in now. So he came in. He eventually admitted on to the Crown that he was relaying messages, but not necessarily, like, they weren't from King. He said King was there to keep people safe, so he did give them that much, which is, and the judge, there was other things that were said that were probably favorable to the Crown that were made note of. Again, if you look through my coverage, you could probably find some of those moments. There's a lot of stuff that happens in court that I do catch that I don't write down, like different reactions that I interpret from somebody that may not be accurate. Like, I might be perceiving something that isn't the way I perceive it. So that's, when somebody makes a face or something, you kind of leave that out because it could mean a lot of different things. So anyways, he testified that he had like this handheld radio on the CB. He was, they were in a convoy. He was just following the convoy where it was going. Like, the Crown basically said you only knew where to get to Ottawa because Pat King told you. And he said, well, no, I was just following the person in front of me. And he had a radio, cheap one, a handheld walkie-talkie, and he had the CB radio, and he was relaying messages that were coming from the front, but there's so many cars in front and behind, and that they would just basically meet in the mornings and decide what they were doing for the day and do it. And it was so long sometimes, the convoy, that he would get to a gas station, not even get to the pumps yet, and the convoy's already leaving. So that's how long it was when they would make their stops. And he did end up staying for, I think, almost the better part of a month. And he slept in his truck most days, sometimes in a hotel for a shower with his wife, and then other times people would offer their homes for laundry, shower, and sleeping, and that's how he did it. And he testified that, again, he was there, it was his own decision, but he had met Pat King previously before the convoy, described him as another oil fields guy. Again, said he was keeping people safe later when the Crown poked to try to get, what was King doing there. They wanted to get him to say that he was a leader. I don't think he can quite say that, but that's the word they're looking for, organizer, leader. I think Mr. Zukato described him as something else, not an instructor, like a coordinator or something, I don't know, but he did agree to a lot of the things the Crown were putting forward. But he also participated in the slow roll at the airport. He said they kept moving the whole time. It was never blocked in both lanes, that an ambulance did go through at one point, but he didn't notice it stopping, and that if anyone wanted to come in, it like signaled to come in, they'd let him in, but they otherwise didn't stop. They just did their loop for 1 to 2 hours. That he did see Pat King filming there, but he doesn't remember watching Pat King's video. The Crown, we sat till 5 with this. The Crown did end up playing some of his videos from his social media. One of the videos when he goes up to he's talking about this 60-foot truck near the Chateau Laurier. I believe it was the black and yellow truck who cranked her and blocked the road, and it was great, or something like that. And then he went over to the War Memorial and met someone who probably was a veteran, and thanked him for what he did and continues to do, and for stopping, for taking the fence that they'd put up down. And then the Crown zeroed in on a comment somebody made talking about watching Pat King's video the day before about the blocking about helping park that truck sideways or whatever near the Chateau Laurier. And then the defense said, well, that's hearsay, it's not admissible unless you call that commenter. And the Crown said, well, it's already in evidence, that video, we're only going to call that, this is just for connecting all the dots. And there was, so he said when he basically testified that he showed up to Coventry as the convoy for the airport was leaving, but he wasn't aware of the post Pat King had made about the slow roll. It was just a coincidence. And then they showed another. They showed him the website again. He said it might have looked familiar, but he doesn't have Pat King or James Bowder's number. They really want to focus in on that website, and just for the number, I guess, or to say that because it lists him as I guess it lists Pat King as a leader, so it's important to them maybe, and also has his number, so they like reading that into the record, even though it's an old number. And he said other things, but guys, this video is running way too long. I appreciate you watching. That's my summary for this, day 13 of the Pat King trial. If you want more of the details, go on my Twitter thread. You can read it to your heart's content. Thank you for following. Let me know in the comments what you think down below. And on Friday, with the closing arguments, we'll see where everything stands and where everybody thinks they stand. I'll see you then. Until next time, have a great evening. I'm John.